when you have this inner peace, this empathy state of consciousness, you can look back at what's happened so far in your week and see if you can notice through this Padma mudra, this opening, was there loving kindness that you didn't notice before? Was there inner beauty that you didn't notice before? And for the tasks and the events and the meetings and the to-do lists that are planned for the rest of the week, can you look and see if you can carry this opening, this compassion, this inner peace, this empathy into those tasks that you have yet to do? And you can always come back to do Logic of the Heart again if you find yourself not in a state of inner peace. That's the beauty of Logic of the Heart, that you can do it over and over and over again. It's not a one time and then everything's perfect. I have somewhere a little drawing from Engineering Concepts called Dynamic Systems and Controls. And it's basically how you design springs and dampers so that the car doesn't bounce and shake you and cause brain damage, right? And there's these graphs where there's this steady state that you're trying to achieve, and reality means that there's bumps and dips, and how fast you get back to this stable state when a bump happens, right? That's what dynamic systems and controls is all about. And Logic of the Heart is a way to do this with our thoughts and our feelings, and even our biochemistry, right? Mind over matter. So we have the sympathies and the antipathies, and I talked about them before in the context of the Echo and Narcissus fairy tale, myth, whatever you want to call it. What's the difference between a myth and a fairy tale anyway? Folktale, fairy tale, myth, basically all tell you something important about human experience. So we have antipathies because that's what brings us back into ourselves. That's how we learn who we are as individuals with individual personalities and individual interests. But if you only have the antipathy, then you turn into Narcissus and you starve to death because you're like in love with yourself, and so you don't eat, right? And then on the other side, we have these sympathies, which is what draws us towards others. And there's a lot of use of the word empathy is really talking about a sympathy. So when you're sharing an experience or someone says that they are going through something, and you're like, oh yeah, I've had a similar experience. That's sympathy. That's not empathy. But sympathy is necessary for connection with other people, for shared experience, and it draws us out of ourselves and makes us interested in the world. And that is also necessary. But if you're only that, then you turn into Echo and you lose all sense of yourself. And you starve to death because you're so in love with Narcissus, who like can't even think about anybody but himself, right? So those are the two extremes that we're bouncing back and forth between all the time through everyday life. And every situation, every experience that we have puts us in this flow from sympathy to antipathy and back and forth. And a particular emotion, a particular situation can get really complicated because you might have some sympathy and some antipathy, and it might all be mixed together. So with Logic of the Heart, the first thing is whatever combination of sympathy and antipathy it happens to be. And whatever combination it happens to be, it has a complement, which is the opposite, except opposite implies that if you start with something red, then the complement should be green. But it's not necessarily that. simple, right? Color theory and the complementary colors are much less complicated than our inner experiences of all these energies and thoughts and feelings and whatever. So the way that we interpret this information through the use of imagination and visualization, it's like when you have computer data that's put in a pretty graph, right? Like the data is the numbers, and we're perceiving that data from our physical bodies as sense perception. And so we can process the information much easier when we use our imagination, because that's how we are used to processing our physical sensations. I have a whole thing about sense perception and then information processing and then how we prioritize things and then how we choose to act afterwards. But again, logic of the heart, we can come back to it, right? We don't have to be scared of something pushing us away from that equilibrium state, because we have this tool to get back. And we can use it as often as we need to, as many times as we need to. I have a recorded, guided logic of the heart that's very general. It's not about a particular situation, like, on Wednesday, rest and reset, right? We're looking at our whole week and all of the things we need to do, all of the obligations we have, family obligations, work obligations, whatever those might be for you. That's applying logic of the heart to a specific situation. This guided meditation is just the steps of noticing the thing and separating, noticing the complement and separating. And it's an audiobook format so that you can adjust the playback speed, you can pause, you can put bookmarks. Sometimes a situation is really complicated and you need to do multiple pairs of separation. Other times, your first thing isn't really the whole of the thing. Sometimes you need like 3 separations because the first 2 things that show up are actually not the complement yet. So I have some recordings of some examples of me talking through the substances that I'm noticing as I do the logic of the heart meditation with myself. And I'm working on getting those available to you, to those of you in the memberships as well, because I think it's really helpful to have some examples of what other people are doing. But I also have this hope that there might be some volunteers who are interested in having me guide you through the logic of the heart one-on-one, and you can describe whatever you're noticing with your words, and then we can put that into this podcast collection of logic of the heart so people get examples of how different people can do this slightly differently depending on how you process information, right? I'm a very visual person, so the visual pieces tend to pop out much faster and more easily. But there are others where it's more of a gesture, like it's a shape, but there's not really a color to it. Or maybe it's more sound or more texture based, or even words. There's alternate modalities of logic of the heart where you can draw on paper, and there's modalities where you can actually write poetry, where you have a line or a set of lines for each of the 3 parts. All of these modalities work because what you're doing is you are giving these substances that are carried by the image or the imagination or the visualization or the words. You're giving them freely to the universe. And the sympathies and the antipathies, they want to come back together, right? Like that the 2 sides of a magnet, they want to stick. They want to come back together. But they can't do that until we separate from them. And once we separate from both of them, they can recombine and form new substances that are healing, not just for us because we've processed our stuff, but now that substance, that energy is out in the world in a balanced way. right? We're not just putting all the yucky stuff out and then the yucky stuff can go wherever and attack other people, right? We're putting the yucky stuff out, then we're putting the complement to the yucky stuff and letting it heal outside of ourselves. And then there's this healing substance that's there that can be used by divine wisdom. And then also when we practice and we do our best to do logic of the heart as often as we need to so that we can be in this inner peace, this empathy state, we can engage with others with more compassion and more gracefulness and more understanding. And we're less likely to be triggered when they do something crazy because we can recognize, oh, that's them, right? They're having some reaction to something. And maybe I want to help. Or maybe it's better for them, for their development, to figure it out themselves, or for them to learn to ask for help. So then you have less pressure, right? Because you have this ability to notice, is it really my responsibility to manage other people's emotions? I don't think so. It's my responsibility to manage my own emotion. And it's your responsibility to manage your emotions. And we all have this tool and we can share it, we can use it. So hopefully I will see you back in a couple of weeks and we'll start up again when I am not on an airplane. I have no idea how I would even make that work. So I will do my own. Hopefully you will too. There's a lot of benefit to doing meditations on a rhythmic schedule. So I'm going to try to figure out the right time as the time zones shift in the airplanes. I'm going to try and figure out the right time and do this myself at the same time, even though I will be on the airplane. And hopefully you will be able to do your own with the assistance either of the recording that I'm going to put up or using that audiobook that is just the basic logic of the heart. Thank you so much for taking the time to do your own inner work. It's so important and it's so undervalued, right? Taking the time to process, taking the time to be still, not just physically still, but still on the inside. And how do we get to that stillness? So, hopefully, I'll see you next time.